Jung identified 7 psychological environments that sap 90% of people's mental strength. These are not physical locations. They are mental traps you step into every day without noticing. Many spend years in these spaces, wondering why they feel exhausted, anxious, or lost. They blame themselves. But Jung understood the real cause. Certain environments literally rewire your brain to work against you. In 1961, Jung treated a patient who appeared entirely normal but was gradually losing his mental stability. Jung traced the issue to 7 specific psychological spaces the man frequented daily. Once Jung guided him to recognize and escape these mental traps, the patient underwent a complete transformation. Today, I'll reveal the exact places that are breaking your mind, how to spot when you're stuck in them, and Jung's escape method that can restore your sanity. What Jung uncovered about these hazardous spaces will alter the way you perceive every relationship, room, and choice for the rest of your life. The first and most perilous place Jung pinpointed is the echo chamber, where every voice around you reflects your own thoughts, beliefs, and biases until they feel like undeniable truth. Jung's patients spent countless hours in social clubs and political meetings where everyone shared his exact opinions, fears about social change, and resentment towards certain groups. He believed he was staying informed, but Jung recognized he was being mentally poisoned. Here's what occurs in an echo chamber. Your neural pathways weaken. Dr. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA shows that without challenge, critical thinking atrophies like unused muscles. Jung termed this collective possession. When group thinking replaces personal thought, the patient stopped questioning anything, as doubting felt like betrayal. His worldview became rigid, fragile, and fearful of differing perspectives. Signs you're trapped in an echo chamber. You can predict how everyone will respond on any topic. Differing views feel threatening rather than intriguing. You've stopped questioning whether your core beliefs might be wrong. Your conversations reinforce, rather than challenge, your thinking. Jung found that people in echo chambers don't just stagnate, they shrink. Their minds become smaller, more anxious, and increasingly dependent on the group for mental security. But this is only the beginning of how these environments erode you. Echo chambers weaken your mind, making you vulnerable to the second dangerous space, the comparison arena, where your value is judged against others' achievements and status. Jung's patient, already fragile from echo chamber exposure, began obsessively comparing himself to peers. Every success of someone else felt like personal failure. Achievements lost significance if someone else had done more. Dr. Rachel Colliger at the University of the West of England confirms Jung's observations. Constant comparison literally shrinks the prefrontal cortex, which governs self-worth and decision-making. The trap: comparison does not inspire growth. It trains the brain to find inadequacy everywhere. Jung called this the inflation-deflation cycle. You feel either superior or inferior, rarely just yourself. The patient told Jung, "I got promoted, but all I could think about was how my college friend became CEO faster. His achievements made mine feel meaningless because they weren't relative victories." Warning signs you're caught in the comparison arena. Other people's successes make you feel like a failure. You accomplish goals but feel empty because someone else did it better. You shape your life to look successful rather than feel fulfilling. Your happiness depends on being ahead of others. Jung understood that this environment is particularly harmful because it severs your connection with your own values and desires. You stop chasing what truly brings joy and start pursuing what brings recognition. But the third place is even more insidious. Before exploring it, you need to grasp the science behind why these spaces are so damaging. Modern neuroscience confirms Jung's insights about environmental psychology. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research demonstrates that toxic psychological environments trigger chronic cortisol release, which literally shrinks the hippocampus, the brain region that governs memory and emotional regulation. But Jung knew this long before neuroscience could prove it. These spaces don't just harm you temporarily, they rewire your default mental state. Spend enough time in toxic environments, and your brain begins recreating their patterns even when you're alone. Jung's patient developed what neuroscientists now call learned helplessness. His mind had been conditioned by these environments to expect failure, criticism, and inadequacy. Even in safe spaces, he could not relax because his neural pathways had been carved by psychological danger. This is why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These environments program your unconscious mind to work against you, and most people fail to notice because the damage accumulates gradually, subtly, beneath conscious awareness. The third dangerous place Jung identified is the performance theater, where authenticity is punished, and only the right mask is rewarded. Jung's patient worked in a corporate setting where showing vulnerability was career suicide. He learned to laugh at unfunny jokes, agree with ideas he opposed, and hide any part of himself that didn't fit the company culture. Jung called this persona identification, when the mask you wear becomes the only identity you recognize. The patient told Jung, "I don't know who I am anymore. I've performed for so long that the real me feels like a stranger." This place is psychologically destructive because it trains you to abandon yourself gradually. Each compromise feels small, yet they accumulate into complete self-betrayal. Dr. Christine Neff's research on self-compassion shows that people trapped in performance theaters develop severe inner critics, internalizing the harsh judgment of these environments and carrying it everywhere. Warning signs you're in a performance theater. You feel drained after social interactions instead of energized. You catch yourself agreeing with things you don't believe. You're afraid to voice unpopular opinions. You feel like you're wearing a costume you can't remove. Your true thoughts and feelings feel dangerous or inappropriate. The patient summarized it perfectly. "I became so good at being what others wanted that I forgot what I wanted. And when I tried to remember, there was nothing there." Jung realized that the performance theater doesn't just conceal your authentic self, it erases it, layer by layer, compromise by compromise, until only a hollow performance remains. Because performance theaters force you to hide your real self, you become vulnerable to the fourth dangerous space, the silent suffering zone, where emotional needs are buried under the illusion of stability. Jung encountered this constantly in his practice. Patients from perfect families where love was assumed but never expressed, where problems were ignored rather than addressed, and appearances mattered more than genuine connection. The patient Jung treated came from exactly this type of family. "We never fought," he told Jung, "but we never really talked either." The patient had learned that having needs was selfish and showing pain was a sign of weakness. This space creates what Jung termed emotional starvation. Emotional needs don't vanish when ignored. They fester in the unconscious, producing anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of emptiness. Dr. Sue Johnson's research on attachment confirms that suppressing emotions in relationships literally dysregulates the nervous system. Your body remains in chronic stress because your emotional needs are never met. The most dangerous aspect of this environment is how normal it feels. The patient told Jung, "I thought we were a close family because we never argued. I didn't realize that avoiding conflict also meant avoiding intimacy." Warning signs that you're trapped in silent suffering. You feel lonely even when among people. You cope with pain instead of healing from it. Asking for emotional support feels selfish or weak. You experience strong feelings but have nowhere safe to express them. Peace in relationships feels fragile, as if it could shatter with too much honesty. Jung discovered that people in this space develop a profound disconnection from their emotional reality. They sense something is wrong but cannot name it because naming it would violate unspoken family or group rules. The fifth dangerous space is the opposite of silence. The chaos storm, where constant mental stimulation drowns out your inner voice until you cannot hear yourself think. Jung's patient lived perpetually in this state. Newspapers demanded his attention. Radio programs fueled anxiety. Social gatherings drained him. Work pressures followed him home. He filled every quiet moment with reading, talking, or activity because silence felt unbearable. But Jung realized this wasn't preference, it was avoidance. The patient feared what he might discover in stillness, unresolved pain, difficult choices, or aspects of himself he didn't want to face. Dr. Adam Gazzaley's research at UCSF shows that chronic mental stimulation impairs your ability to form coherent thoughts and make sound decisions. The prefrontal cortex becomes overwhelmed, driving impulsive choices just to reduce cognitive load. Jung called this psychic fragmentation. When attention is scattered, the patient consumed massive amounts of information but could not make sense of any of it. Here's the trap. Chaos becomes addictive. The brain adapts to high stimulation and craves ever more intense input to feel normal. Quiet moments trigger anxiety because the nervous system has forgotten how to self-regulate. Warning signs of the chaos storm. Silence makes you immediately reach for a book, newspaper, or radio. You have strong opinions about everything but a deep understanding of nothing. You feel busy yet cannot recall what you accomplished. Slowing down triggers anxiety instead of peace. You constantly consume information but feel empty inside. The patient told Jung, "I stay busy because when I stop, all the things I'm avoiding catch up with me. But I'm exhausted from running." Because the chaos storm trains you to avoid your inner voice, you become susceptible to the sixth dangerous place, the self-abandonment chamber, where you systematically ignore your own needs, instincts, and truth. This is the most insidious space because it happens gradually. You say yes when everything inside screams no. You remain in draining relationships because leaving feels harder than enduring. You prioritize comfort over authenticity, safety over growth. Jung's patient described it perfectly. "I became so skilled at ignoring my gut instincts that I stopped having them. Every decision was based on what others expected, what seemed practical, or what would avoid conflict." Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's research on trauma shows that chronic self-abandonment literally disconnects you from your body's wisdom. You lose the ability to recognize your needs, desires, and feelings because they have been consistently overridden. Jung called this soul loss, not a mystical idea, but a psychological reality in which you become estranged from your own core self. The patient said, "I felt like I was living someone else's life. I couldn't remember the last time I made a choice based on what I truly wanted." This space is particularly dangerous because it disguises itself as maturity, responsibility, or selflessness. Society often rewards self-abandonment, making it even harder to recognize as a problem. Warning signs: you're trapped in the self-abandonment chamber. You can't recall the last time you checked in with your own feelings. Your decisions are guided by expectations rather than what feels right. You've stopped caring about things that once mattered to you. You feel like you're living on autopilot. When someone asks what you want, you genuinely don't know. Jung realized that this space creates a terrifying emptiness. The patient told him, "I succeeded at everything I was supposed to want, but inside I felt completely hollow. I didn't know who I was beneath all the shoulds and have-tos." The seventh and most dangerous place Jung identified exists entirely within your own mind. The shadow basement, where you lock away parts of yourself you are too afraid or ashamed to face. Jung's patient had spent years avoiding this inner space. Every time painful memories, shameful thoughts, or difficult emotions arose, he pushed them into what Jung called the personal unconscious. But Jung discovered something frightening. What you bury does not stay buried. It grows stronger in the darkness, subtly influencing your behavior. The patient found himself sabotaging relationships, overreacting to minor slights, and repeating patterns he had sworn he'd never repeat. Dr. Peter Levine's research on trauma shows that unprocessed emotional content literally resides in the nervous system, creating chronic dysregulation until it is consciously integrated. Jung called this shadow possession, when the parts of yourself you've rejected begin controlling your life from the unconscious. The patient told Jung, "I became everything I hate about my father, but I didn't see it happening until the damage was done." The shadow basement is dangerous because avoidance only empowers these rejected parts. They manifest as projection, addiction, sudden rage, or inexplicable self-sabotage. Yet Jung also discovered that the shadow holds immense power and creativity. When consciously integrated, the patient's anger became passionate advocacy, his sadness transformed into deep empathy, and his shame turned into fierce compassion for others facing similar struggles. Warning signs that you're avoiding the shadow basement. You experience intense emotional reactions that surprise you. You repeat relationship patterns despite knowing better. You judge others harshly for traits you secretly fear in yourself. You struggle with persistent anxiety or depression without a clear cause. You feel like you're battling an invisible enemy within. Jung realized that true healing requires descending into this basement with curiosity and compassion, not self-judgment. Now that you can identify these 7 dangerous places, how do you escape them? Jung developed what he called the individuation process, a systematic path to psychological freedom. Step 1. Conscious recognition. You cannot leave a place you don't know you're in. Jung's patient had to honestly assess which of these environments he inhabited daily, requiring brutal honesty without self-judgment. Step 2. Environmental audit. Examine every space you regularly occupy, both physical and digital. Jung taught that awareness transforms unconscious influence into conscious choice. Ask yourself, does this environment help me grow, or does it keep me small? Step 3. Strategic withdrawal. You don't need to abandon your life, but you must limit exposure to toxic psychological spaces. The patient started with small changes, reducing time in toxic social circles, setting boundaries with negative people, and creating daily periods of solitude and reflection. Step 4. Conscious integration. Here Jung's method becomes revolutionary. Instead of merely avoiding harmful environments, you must deliberately cultivate positive ones. Seek people who challenge you kindly, spaces that support growth, and environments where authenticity is valued. Step 5. Shadow work. Jung believed that until you confront what you've hidden in the shadow basement, you will unconsciously recreate toxic patterns everywhere you go. This requires therapy, journaling, or other practices that bring unconscious content into awareness. Step 6. Regular maintenance. Jung discovered that psychological freedom demands ongoing vigilance. These dangerous spaces are seductive because they provide false comfort, easy belonging, or familiar patterns. You must consciously choose growth over comfort, truth over convenience. The patient told Jung after 6 months, "I didn't realize how much mental energy I was wasting in those toxic spaces. Now that I've left them, it feels like I have my mind back." Jung documented remarkable transformations when people escaped these psychological traps. His patient story became a blueprint for thousands seeking mental freedom. Within 3 months of leaving the echo chamber, his critical thinking improved dramatically. He began questioning assumptions, seeking diverse perspectives, and making decisions based on evidence rather than groupthink. After leaving the comparison arena, he discovered interests and goals that were truly his own. He stopped measuring his worth against others and began pursuing work aligned with his values rather than his image. Escaping the performance theater was more difficult because it meant disappointing people who preferred his mask to his authentic self. But Jung taught him that relationships built on false performance are not real relationships at all. The silent suffering space required learning entirely new communication skills. The patient had to practice expressing his needs, setting boundaries, and asking for support, skills his family had never modeled. Escaping the chaos storm meant developing tolerance for stillness, boredom, and the anxiety that initially surfaced in quiet moments. But Jung knew that wisdom only arises in contemplative space. The self-abandonment chamber demanded the most frightening change, making decisions based on his own truth rather than external expectations. This meant letting some people down, but it also meant finally living authentically. Shadow basement work was ongoing, yet each integration made him more whole, more compassionate, and less prone to projecting his issues onto others. Jung observed that people who escape these spaces don't just feel better, they become entirely different people. Their relationships improve, decision-making clarifies, and they develop what Jung called psychological sovereignty. What Jung discovered about his patient's transformation reveals a profound truth about psychological environments. When you change your relationship with these spaces, you change the spaces themselves. The patient's family initially resisted his new boundaries and emotional honesty. They tried to pull him back into silent suffering because his growth threatened their familiar patterns. But Jung taught him to maintain his changes with compassion rather than aggression. Gradually, his authenticity gave others permission to be real. His sister began expressing her own long-buried feelings. His father admitted to decades of hidden depression. The family system started healing because one person refused to participate in dysfunction. At work, the patient stopped performing and began contributing authentically. Some colleagues felt threatened, but others were inspired. He discovered that authentic leadership is far more powerful than performance-based people-pleasing. Jung called this the ripple effect of individuation. When you stop participating in toxic psychological patterns, those patterns are forced either to evolve or dissolve. The patient told Jung, "I thought changing myself would leave me lonely, but it actually attracted people seeking real connection. I traded many superficial relationships for a few meaningful ones, and it was the best exchange I ever made." This is Jung's ultimate insight about these dangerous spaces. They persist because we collectively agree to inhabit them. But when enough individuals choose psychological freedom, the collective environment transforms. Recall Jung's original discovery. 90% of people's mental strength is eroded by these 7 psychological environments. Now you know something most people don't. You can choose differently. Jung's patient began as a man slowly losing his mind in spaces that felt normal, even comfortable. He ended as someone who had reclaimed his psychological sovereignty and guided others to do the same. The 7 dangerous places Jung identified are not abstract concepts. They are real psychological environments encountered daily. The echo chamber that confirms biases while weakening your mind. The comparison arena that renders achievements meaningless. The performance theater that rewards pretense and punishes authenticity. The silent suffering space that buries your needs beneath false peace. The chaos storm that drowns your inner voice in noise. The self-abandonment chamber where you betray yourself gradually. And the shadow basement where parts of your soul are locked away. But Jung also revealed the path out, not through escape or avoidance, but through conscious recognition, strategic choices, and the courage to grow beyond comfort. The patient Jung treated in 1961 went on to become a therapist himself, helping others recognize and escape these same psychological traps. He understood that mental strength is not about avoiding difficulty. It's about choosing which challenges serve your growth. Jung's final lesson: these places will always exist, and they will always be seductive. Echo chambers offer easy belonging. Comparison arenas promise motivation. Performance theaters provide approval. Silent suffering feels like peace. Chaos storms distract from pain. Self-abandonment avoids conflict. Shadow basements hide shame. But true mental strength comes from choosing growth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and consciousness over convenience. The question isn't whether you'll encounter these dangerous places. You will. The question is whether you will recognize them when you do. Will you have the courage to leave? And will you create psychological environments where others can be free too? Jung believed that the future of human consciousness depends on individuals brave enough to choose psychological freedom over collective unconsciousness. That choice begins with recognizing where you are now and deciding where you want to be. Your mind is not your enemy, but the spaces you allow it to inhabit might be. Which of these 7 dangerous places have you spent too much time in? Share your recognition in the comments. Sometimes naming where we've been is the first step towards psychological freedom. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights that can transform your relationship with your own mind. If you're ready to explore further Jung's insights about psychological transformation, check out my video on the most dangerous Jung psychology sign, Stay Alert, where I reveal the warning signs that someone is projecting their unconscious shadow onto you and why immediate withdrawal may be your only protection. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.